Hey YouTube, today I wanted to talk about who I have as the best Rocket League 1v1 players in the world right now. We have just had some tournaments recently that have made it pretty easy for us to decide. In fact, I talked about this during the tournaments that we're probably going to have a pretty clear number one or, top few. And I think we do have at least a couple clear choices, but I'm going to go into my top three today and talk about where I have them and why, and see if you guys can maybe try and guess before I get into it. But what I first want to talk about is who I'm going to put at number 3, because who I put at number 3, I think is probably the only controversial choice I have on my list. And as these games go on, you're going to be seeing gameplay from the players on screen while I talk about what I think makes them deserving of this current spot. Maybe you haven't been watching the tournaments recently and you want to just be keyed in. Who's the best in the ones game right now? Well, my number 3 is actually going to be somebody who you haven't seen playing in the tournaments. And the reason why is I think this is the only player, or one of the only 2 players, that has a chance at contending with the current best that we don't know their results already. So I'm beating around the bush. For the first one, from number 3, I'm going to put Yan. Yan XNZ from Brazil. I have him as number 3 1v1 player in the world. I don't think that we can put him any higher than that, considering the fact that we didn't see him in any of the recent tournaments, and we've had a ton of recent games played. But I think he might be the best in the world. I think him, along with TRK, you could honestly put either one of them here, but I think the recent results for Yan is just a little bit more conclusive than they are for TRK to suggest that he might be the best in the world. Looking at his recent show matches, he's beat the likes of KV1, AZAP, CRR. He lost to Jack at I think it might have been at Worlds. He lost to him at Worlds in a 1v1, but I ended up playing him again and beat him on my channel when Jack moved to North America, and they were both in North America since Furia was there this year too. Or this season, I should say. And he also beat Chronic as well. So he's had a lot of good results, and especially you watch him play on the field, I think his gameplay is suggestive of somebody who is, kind of dominating in ones as of late. And if you watch a lot of ones games, you can get an idea of players who you can believe in beyond their results. And I think Yan is definitely one of those guys. TRK, he was able to beat First Killer recently. I think he beat First Killer at Worlds, and he also beat Gomb and Senzo. I haven't seen a ton of show matches from him other than that. His last tournament result was the Swamp, in which he lost to Kaliers, and so a mix of some things that have basically made me feel like he's not as likely to take over that one spot. If everybody was in the same location running these tournaments, I think Yan would have a better chance. But we haven't seen him and what he can do against the top players, because Furia did go back to South America after they weren't able to qualify for the major. So I think right now what people want to see is they want to see Yan, they want to see TRK, they want to see both of them against the players that I have at 1 and 2. And I don't know if I have anything else more to say about Yan. So we'll move on to who I have at number 2. At number 2 in the world right now, I have Rawas. So you might have an idea of who I have at number 1 after telling you that I have Rawas at number 2. But Rawas has one of the biggest tournament runs that I have seen in a while. He won the Pro Drops MENA, which was a tournament that Johnny Boy ran that had only players from MENA. Actually, I think it was a MENA, because it had Asia, Middle East, Northern Africa, all 3 of those regions. I think that the Pro Drops regional tournaments, since they were split up into 3, except for the North American one, might have been a little bit weaker than they otherwise could have been. Normally we see the MENA and EU guys play in the same tournament like they did in my 5K, but with the Pro Drops MENA, I would say that Rawas that was his tournament to lose. And credit to him for not losing it, and for really not even coming close to dropping any matches. That shows that he is that kind of high level. Sometimes players that aren't this as good as he is manage to lose games. So credit to him for winning a tournament he should have. I think the EU 5K, which had the Middle East players and the EU players, had a little bit more of competition at that top level. You have guys like Joreas, guys like Moxie, guys like Khaled, these people who are potentially fighting for these top 3 spots that I'm listing. And so that win there, because he also did win the EU 5K, I think holds a little bit more weight towards these top rankings. Of course, winning the Pro Drops MENA is important, and he did do that, but also the EU 5K and then the World 5K win. So he had a win over First Killer, who came from the North American side of that, and then a win over Moxie. A couple different wins over Moxie. His matchup over Moxie has looked good for him recently, something that historically hasn't looked as solid. I filmed a video a few months ago on this topic of the top 3 players in Moxie. I think the top 3 I had then was Jack, Jorias, and Moxie. So, you know, getting those wins over Moxie is very impressive. We also saw Rawas in the world for the pro drops get wins over everybody but Daniel. So Rawas getting wins over Jorias and Jack. So other players that have potentially had, you know, tournament wins or arguments for this spot at number 2, I think Rawas has shown that he is better. And I think a lot of people would have Rawas at number 1. Unfortunately for him, he has had one recent matchup against the player that I do have at number 1, in which he wasn't able to take. And so let's move on. Number 1, I think we can all agree. Maybe we can't. Maybe you guys will blow up in the comments. I know I've been biased towards this guy before, but Daniel is once again the best in the world. If you ask me, Daniel has been the best in the world before, around the time that he played against the EU and Middle East players in what was not a tournament, just a couple show matches. He either tied or won against all the other players that had an argument for best in the world. At that time, the downside to saying Daniel was the best, or the counter argument you would use, is that they weren't tournaments. They weren't tournaments. He got to play just single show matches against the best. And guys like Drally, you could argue were the best in the world for the same reason if you go just by show matches. Drally had some wins for a short moment where he had wins over everybody in the game, despite not maybe reaching them and beating them in tournaments. He did win the Fear Fest, but you know, you probably need a little bit more to really back your argument. But Daniel has erased that. He has won the North American Pro Drops, which had the top 8 from North America minus First Killer, and instead had KV1. And then he had a good performance. He destroyed the World Pro Drops, so he played against Jack, Jorias, Rawas all on land very recently, and he was able to beat all of them. And then his only blemish, or really you could argue 2 blemishes, is a loss to Evo, which is actually a match that I haven't went back and watched. And before it, I actually promised to Johnny Boy that Daniel will win that one. Daniel, I feel like Daniel is, of course, you know, as I'm saying, he's the best one player in the world. He should have the matchup over Evo, but I thought he had a special matchup with Evo where he would pretty much never let Evo win. So maybe I need to go back and watch what happened there. I heard Daniel might have played some Dominus, so maybe that was the reason. But either way, that's one blemish, and then the reverse sweep that Jack was able to get on him. The reverse sweep that Jack was able to get on him is definitely what is holding him back from having a truly unarguable spot at number 1. Because if he was able to beat Jack in that best of 7, it means he would have went to the Worlds for the 5K as well, and he would have had his chance against Rawas or Moxie from the EU side. And I have a feeling I would bet money that he would have won that one too. The way he's been playing right now has been truly special. So Daniel is who I have at number 1. Rawas, I think, has a great argument for number 2. I think Jorias and Jack, who are around the conversation, who have won tournaments recently, you know, they just don't have the head-to-head that these other players do around the top. And that's actually why I included Yan at number 3, because I think that Yan has an opportunity to beat both Rawas and Daniel. We haven't been able to see that matchup yet. I think it could happen. It's also possible for TRK. That's why I almost want to throw Yan in, because I feel like you can't argue for anybody over the top of Daniel and Rawas. And if you've been watching the tournaments recently, then you knew what I was going to go for. You know, this is not a huge surprise in terms of rankings, but I wanted to just bring out the top 3. Maybe at some point we'll be doing a tier list to see, you know, where we think certain players fall, because I think it has been interesting how that has changed. I've also thought about doing one of these videos at least once a month to just kind of almost be a record of the one's game and who's at the top right now and how it shifts around, because it's interesting. Because before, like I said, I had Jack, Jorias, Moxie. So this time around, I actually don't have any of those 3. I have Daniel, Rawas, Yan. So if the top 3 is switching that much, maybe we should do this a little bit more often. Tell me if that's something that you guys would like. The tournament's over, so it's back to a few more videos made just for YouTube and not necessarily just streamed show matches. Of course, I'll always try and keep as many show matches up there as possible. And don't forget, we have that big tournament coming thanks to you guys' huge support, as I'm sure you might have been slightly annoyed at the 5-second adverts or whatever inside the YouTube videos to subscribe. But seriously, I appreciate you guys subscribing a ton. This has been the biggest spike in subscribers I've ever seen, and it's going to lead to hopefully one more good tournament before the end of the year. So thank you guys so much for all the support. Hopefully you like my top 3. If not, I tell you what, I'm right, so you might just have to deal with it. But thank you guys. Thank you. I'll see you next time.